A series of armed robberies and bombings have put the FBI on high alert as they uncover links to a radical group intent on overthrowing the government. These extremists operate in the shadows, setting deadly traps for anyone who dares to stand in their way. Law enforcement agencies are racing against time to stop them before their reign of terror escalates. The U.S. Constitution guarantees its citizens the right to free speech. However, when a paramilitary group crosses a line, using explosives and bank heists to push their agenda, law enforcement has no choice but to intervene. This particular terror cell is highly organized, making it both difficult to identify and even harder to dismantle. I'm Jim Carlstrom, former head of the FBI's New York field office. He introduces himself. By the time this group was preparing for yet another robbery, both federal agents and local police were determined to put an end to their operations. Spokane, Washington, a city of 200,000 residents located near the Idaho border. On Monday, April 1st, 1996, dozens of employees were hard at work inside the offices of the Spokesman Review, the city's local newspaper. At around 2:30 p.m., a white delivery van pulled up behind the building, idling for no more than 15 seconds. Inside, a reporter had just finished his shift and was eager to spend the afternoon with his son. Neither of them had any idea what awaited them just outside the door. Then an explosion. The blast severely damaged the building. But miraculously, no one was injured. As emergency crews from the Spokane County Sheriff's Department arrived at the scene, witnesses were questioned. The reporter and his son, having been nearby, hadn't noticed anything suspicious before the explosion. Was there anyone else inside at the time? Officers inquired. Yes, an employee confirmed. And just moments before the explosion, I saw a masked man jump into a white van. He sped off so quickly, I couldn't make out any details. While most law enforcement officers were still occupied at the newspaper's headquarters, another crisis unfolded just a few miles away. Only 15 minutes after the bombing, the same white van pulled up outside a branch of the U.S. Bank. Move, move, move. Two masked men, heavily armed, stormed inside. "This is a robbery," one of them shouted. A bank employee discreetly activated the silent alarm while complying with their demands. "Who's in charge here?" one of the robbers demanded, waving his weapon threateningly. To ensure obedience, they issued a chilling threat. They had a pipe bomb and wouldn't hesitate to detonate it if anyone tried to resist. "Fill the bags," they ordered. The employees followed instructions but knew better than to hand over marked security packs, bundles of cash designed to explode with dye, rendering stolen money useless. After securing the cash, the robber corralled the employees into a corner. Every second that passed brought them closer to danger, as the bomb's fuse continued burning. "Time to go," one of them barked. Back at the newspaper bombing site, law enforcement officers received word over the radio. There had been a bank robbery, and an explosion had just gone off at the scene. With the initial crime scene secured, detectives quickly redirected their attention to the bank. The sheriff's department dispatched additional deputies to assist. At the same time, Special Agent Mark Karen of the Spokane FBI field office was en route to the newspaper's headquarters. "We were on our way to the bombing site when we heard the call about the bank robbery," Karen recalls. "Since bank heists are my area of expertise, I immediately redirected toward the scene." By the time he arrived, employees and customers were still in shock. However, there was relief. Everyone had managed to escape before the explosion went off. "We haven't cleared the scene yet," one of the officers warned. "Be on the lookout for any additional threats." Sergeant James Goodwin, head of the bomb squad, had another concern. "There's always a chance that the suspects left behind another explosive," he explained. "Sometimes bombers set traps for the police." The bomb squad meticulously swept the bank, ensuring no secondary devices were left behind. "All clear," Goodwin eventually confirmed. "Now, let's start gathering evidence." But one thing was already obvious. This was no ordinary bank robbery. The way the robbers operated was far from typical. Most bank heists are carried out by desperate individuals, often acting alone, attempting to secure quick cash, sometimes to support a drug habit or escape financial trouble. But this attack was different. These criminals were disciplined, methodical, and highly organized. Within moments, they had stormed the bank, grabbed $50,000, and vanished. This wasn't some reckless smash and grab, an investigator noted. They moved with precision and had a level of brutality you don't see in everyday bank robberies. As investigators combed through evidence, they interviewed a woman who had been outside in the parking lot when the explosion occurred. "I saw two masked men run out of the bank," she recalled. "They jumped into a white van, and a third man was already behind the wheel." The witness was able to provide a crucial detail. The driver was an older man with gray hair and a beard. "Did you see the license plate?" an agent asked. "Yes," she nodded. "I wrote it down." That small detail turned out to be a major breakthrough. The white van used in both the bombing and the robbery was traced back to Ellensburg, Washington, where it had been reported stolen. FBI agents, along with local law enforcement, immediately issued a region-wide alert for the vehicle. Officers began systematically searching the area, hoping to locate it before the suspects could switch cars and disappear. Back at the spokesman review office, agents continued questioning witnesses. "So, after the explosion, they just sped off?" one officer asked. "Yes," another witness confirmed. "But there's something else. They left behind a stack of flyers with religious messages." That detail was crucial. The same propaganda was found at the scene of the bank robbery. "It wasn't unusual to see religious handouts in this area," said an FBI agent. "Groups like this often distribute their messages by leaving pamphlets on doorsteps or placing them under windshield wipers. But there was a key difference. This particular group wasn't just spreading its ideology through words. They were using violence." Roughly 90 minutes after the robbery, a sheriff's deputy spotted the stolen white van parked about a mile from the bank. Approaching with caution, he noted something unsettling. He couldn't see inside. Were the suspects still inside? The dispatcher sent out a warning. "Be advised, vehicle may be rigged with explosives." Minutes later, the bomb squad arrived. "Given what we knew about these suspects," explained an officer, "we had to assume they might have booby-trapped the vehicle." One of the first concerns was a potential remote detonator. If the van contained a bomb, radio signals, such as those from police walkie-talkies, could accidentally trigger an explosion. "Kill all radios," the team leader ordered. With that precaution in place, a specialized robot was deployed to inspect the van. The robotic camera fed back grainy footage. Something was inside, but it wasn't clear what. "We had to be sure," one technician explained. After the robot's initial sweep, a bomb squad member suited up in protective gear and carefully approached the van. As he got closer, he noticed a strong smell of gasoline. Looking under the door, he saw liquid pooling on the pavement. "It's a homemade incendiary device," he reported back. "They rigged it with a crude timer to ignite the gas." If the device had worked as intended, the van would have erupted in flames, destroying any evidence inside. The technician worked swiftly, defusing the bomb before it could detonate. "We're good," he signaled. Once the scene was secure, investigators searched the van. Inside, they found another set of the religious flyers that had been left behind at the previous crime scenes. "Take a look at this," an agent said, handing a copy to Special Agent David Bedford. The phrasing and rhetoric were unmistakable. "This language matches the propaganda used by white supremacist groups in the region," Bedford noted. One thing stood out, a symbol at the bottom of the page. It was a Christian cross, overlaid with a large letter P. An investigative journalist, Bill Moreland, was called in to consult. For more than 2 decades, Moreland had studied extremist groups in the Pacific Northwest. "I've seen this before," Moreland confirmed. "That's the emblem of the Phineas priesthood." The Phineas priesthood wasn't an organized group in the traditional sense. "They don't have official leaders or public meetings," Moreland explained. "You won't find them listed in any directories. Instead, Phineas priests viewed themselves as warriors acting on divine authority. They believed certain crimes, such as robbing banks, were justified as long as the money was used to further their cause. This ideology draws in people from different extremist movements: anti-tax activists, anti-abortion radicals, Ku Klux Klan members, and those who oppose the government altogether." Moreland continued. The implications were alarming. This wasn't just about money, an FBI agent realized. They were waging a holy war. Moreland mentioned an interview he had conducted months earlier with a group of extremists. They didn't explicitly call themselves Phineas priests, he said, but they echoed the same beliefs. The meeting had been unsettling. They took us to a remote location, he recalled. There were 6 or 7 of them, all heavily armed. Automatic rifles, shotguns, pistols, everything. They wore camouflage and moved like they were preparing for war. At one point, Moreland had asked him a direct question. What would you do if the police tried to stop you? One of the men didn't hesitate. I'd kill them, he had said flatly. We're not playing games. If a cop tries to get in our way, he's dead. Hearing this, the FBI agents exchanged looks. The men responsible for the Spokane crimes weren't just armed criminals. They were prepared to kill. Law enforcement now had a strong lead. The bombings and robberies pointed to a Phineas priesthood cell operating in Washington. The challenge now was identifying the suspects before they struck again. Investigators feared they wouldn't have to wait long. 3 months after the bombing at the Spokesman Review and the bank robbery, law enforcement feared that the extremist group might be planning another attack. Their instincts were right. On July 12th, a woman witnessed a masked man placing an explosive device in front of a local clinic. She acted quickly, memorizing the vehicle's license plate and reporting it to the police. Meanwhile, across town, chaos was about to unfold again. The same U.S. bank branch that had been targeted in April was under attack once more. "This is a robbery," shouted one of the masked men as they burst into the building, weapons drawn. Unlike the previous heist, this time there were 3 armed robbers instead of 2. "Turn around. Open the door," one of them barked at a bank employee. Just like before, they had brought a bomb with them. The threat was clear. Any resistance would mean disaster. One of the bank employees recognized the voice of one of the robbers. As she discreetly placed the cash in the bag, she pressed the silent alarm. "Hurry up!" another robber snapped, keeping a gun trained on hostages. The criminals executed the robbery with efficiency, using code words and working with precise timing. However, they failed to notice an employee working the drive-through window in a separate section of the building. Thinking quickly, she tried to alert a customer waiting in his car, subtly gesturing for him to call the police. Inside, the robbers were unaware that an alarm had been triggered. They continued stuffing money into bags, preparing to leave. In total, they secured $37,000 in cash. "Move out," one of them ordered. Just as in the previous robbery, they took the bomb with them. The drive-through customer, realizing what was happening, watched as the masked men rushed to a van and sped away. He immediately followed them while calling 911. The police were already on their way, but there was a problem. The license plate number the witness provided didn't match the one reported at the clinic bombing. This was a deliberate tactic. Criminals often switch plates between different crimes to throw off investigators. The 911 dispatcher urged the witness to stay safe and maintain a reasonable distance. The goal was to keep the suspects in sight until officers could catch up. By now, law enforcement was fully aware of the pattern. These weren't random crimes. They were acts of domestic terrorism orchestrated by a group determined to make a statement through destruction. As officers responded, they knew one thing for certain. The criminals weren't done yet. By July 1996, authorities were convinced that a radical extremist group was responsible for the series of bank robberies and bombings in Spokane. As the criminals made their getaway after the second bank heist, a civilian driver was tailing them, relaying their movements to the police. Deputy Dan By of the Spokane Sheriff's Office was already on his way to the clinic bombing scene when he received an urgent update. Another bank robbery had just occurred, and the suspects were on the move. A coordinated pursuit was immediately set in motion. The witness following the suspects kept officers informed, but maintaining the tail was becoming increasingly difficult. "I lost them," he reported. They turned behind a shopping center. Deputy By and other units immediately scoured the area, but the suspect had managed to slip away. Determined not to let them vanish completely, By methodically searched the surrounding streets. An hour later, his patience paid off. In a downtown parking garage, he spotted a suspicious van. "Excuse me, sir," he said, approaching a bystander. "I need you to step back." He took a closer look at the vehicle. It had two different license plates, one linked to the clinic bombing and the other to the bank robbery. By now, the scene was all too familiar. Bomb squad officers were called in immediately. Given the criminal's history, they had to assume the van was rigged with explosives. As the team approached, they were hit with a strong smell of gasoline. It's probably another incendiary device, one of the bomb techs speculated. Rather than risk a manual inspection, they deployed their remote-control robot, equipped with cameras and mechanical arms. The thickly tinted windows made it difficult to see inside, but something was definitely there. "We're going to have to breach a window," one of the technicians decided. Using a pressurized water cannon, they shattered the glass. Once the view was clear, the team spotted multiple propane tanks and what appeared to be a timer. "It's a trigger mechanism," the lead technician confirmed. The setup was designed to ignite the vehicle and destroy any remaining evidence. Carefully, the bomb techs worked to neutralize the device. After several tense minutes, the lead technician gave the signal. All clear. With the threat eliminated, investigators searched the van. Unlike the previous getaway vehicle, this one contained no propaganda flyers or other obvious evidence. Still, the pattern was undeniable. The FBI was now certain that they were dealing with a well-organized domestic terror cell. It was time to escalate the investigation. Agents turned to forensic specialists, hoping that surveillance footage from the banks could help identify the suspects. Using advanced photogrammetry techniques, analysts compared the suspects' heights and builds with known profiles. The results confirmed what investigators had suspected. Two of the robbers from the April heist had returned for the July attack. One was about 5 feet 7 inches, the other approximately 6 feet 1 inch. "This isn't a copycat case," an agent remarked. "These are the same guys." At this point, the FBI made a critical decision. The suspects were no longer just violent criminals. They were now classified as domestic terrorists. To incentivize the public's help, the U.S. bank offered a $130,000 reward for information leading to their capture. Despite the hefty sum, weeks passed without a major break in the case. In August 1996, a month after the second bank robbery, an informant contacted authorities with a crucial tip. He claimed to recognize the man depicted in the FBI's sketch. The informant, a licensed firearms dealer, recalled meeting a group of men months earlier, before the wave of robberies began. He had sold them military-grade clothing and gear, but their requests soon turned suspicious. They wanted for plastic explosives and a rocket launcher, he told investigators. When he refused to supply those items, they pressed further, inquiring about armor plating for vehicles and machine gun mounts. "I told them I couldn't help," the informant recalled. Before leaving, one of the men had made a chilling remark. "A small, well-organized group can bring down the banking system." The meeting had taken place at a workshop in Sandpoint, Idaho, about 90 kilometers from Spokane. By late August, the FBI had turned its full attention to this location. Agents set up a surveillance post in an abandoned building across the street, using long-range cameras to monitor the workshop. The men coming and going from the shop matched the descriptions of the bank robbers. One of them was identified as Robert Berry, the workshop's owner. Despite having no legitimate business income, Berry was living comfortably, raising suspicions about how he was funding his lifestyle. A second man, Charles Barbie, had a prior arrest for attempting to buy stolen military equipment. The third suspect, William Merrill, fit the witness descriptions of the getaway driver. "He's our guy," one agent noted. As the FBI gathered more intel, they discovered that the suspects rarely followed a normal work routine. "They didn't seem to have jobs," one investigator observed. Yet, they always had money. Over the following weeks, agents took hundreds of photos of the suspects and their associates. Still, they needed more evidence before making an arrest. In early September, a team of agents took a major risk. Under the cover of darkness, they planted a hidden surveillance camera on a utility pole near the workshop. The move paid off. Captured footage showed the suspects testing weapons, experimenting with different types of ammunition, and discussing tactics. They weren't just preparing for another bank robbery. They were preparing for war. By mid-September, The FBI noticed men taking frequent road trips, visiting different towns in the Pacific Northwest. It became clear that they weren't just traveling for leisure. They were scouting new targets. Then, on September 6, 1996, several institutions in Spokane received anonymous letters warning of upcoming attacks. Investigators knew they had little time left. A plan was put in place. Agents would monitor the suspects around the clock, trailing them to their next target. The goal was to catch them in the act before anyone else got hurt. A month later, on October 8th, the men made their move. From the surveillance post, agents watched as the suspects left the workshop, heading west. "They're on the move," one agent radioed in. Authorities immediately mobilized, knowing that whatever happened next could be the key to end the reign of terror once and for all. On October 8, 1996, after months of surveillance, FBI agents watched as the suspects left their workshop in Sandpoint, Idaho, and headed west. A tracking team was immediately deployed. "They're on the highway, moving toward Washington," an agent reported over the radio. The suspect's vehicle had mismatched license plates. Both had been reported stolen. That alone confirmed the urgency of the situation. For nearly 650 kilometers, agents tailed them, careful to maintain distance. When the suspects crossed into Oregon, they stopped in the town of Hood River. At a used car lot, they stole a minivan, adding another vehicle to their convoy. "They're swapping cars," one agent noted. "They might be setting up for another hit." To test that theory, agents continued tracking them. After hours of driving, they reached the outskirts of Portland. By 6 a.m., they were maneuvering through the city suburbs. At 10 a.m., it became clear where they were headed. "They're pulling into a bank parking lot," an agent confirmed. At that moment, the FBI took action. They contacted the bank and ordered an immediate lockdown, securing all customers and employees inside. The plan was simple: wait for the suspect to step out of their vehicle and arrest them before they could act. However, something changed. From their surveillance position, agents watched as the men pulled masks over their faces and reached for their weapons. Then, they noticed something was wrong. The bank doors were locked. Potential customers were walking away, unable to enter. Realizing their plan had failed, the suspects hesitated. "They're backing off," an agent reported. Instead of proceeding with the robbery, the men abruptly left the parking lot. Agents quickly adapted. A direct arrest attempt in the city could be dangerous, so they continued their tale. As the suspects drove north, heading back toward Washington, FBI officials made a decision: find the next safe opportunity to take them down. A few hours later, in the town of Union Gap, the suspect stopped at a gas station. The lead agent gave the order: "Move in." With the suspects separated, one inside the store, two waiting in a vehicle, agents struck simultaneously. "FBI, hands up." Within seconds, all three men were in custody. A search of their vehicles revealed an alarming discovery: grenades, thousands of rounds of ammunition, assault rifles, gas masks, and tear gas canisters. These guys were gearing up for a fight, an agent noted. Even more disturbing, a threatening letter addressed to the same Spokane bank they had already robbed twice was found in the van. Despite the arrests, one question remained unanswered: where was the fourth suspect? Investigators quickly turned their focus to Brian Redigan. A former military sniper, Redigan was known for being extremely cautious and heavily armed. Through interviews with family members, agents learned that he was growing paranoid and considering leaving the area. Wanting to avoid a violent confrontation, the FBI convinced his relatives to help. A plan was set in motion. A train ticket was sent to Redigan, arranged for a time when no other passengers would be at the station. As he arrived, thinking he was leaving town unnoticed, undercover agents surrounded him. FBI, hands against the wall. With no escape, he surrendered without a fight. The case was finally closed. On July 24th, 1997, Charles Barbie, Robert Berry, and William Merrill were convicted of 8 counts of robbery and bombing. Each received a life sentence. In a separate trial, Brian Redigan was found guilty of the same charges and sentenced to 55 years in prison. Though this terror cell had been dismantled, the FBI remained vigilant, While extremist attacks had decreased, investigative journalist Bill Moreland issued a warning. "These groups don't disappear," he said. "They just go underground, waiting for the right moment to strike again."